My mum's died, my dad's died, my brother's died, my aunties have died, so I'm like sort of like all alone really, so I've dealt a lot with death. And the first time it happened, I think the first time was when my dad died. And I didn't know who to talk to about it. I wasn't sure how I was meant to feel about it or what I was allowed to express. And I found it very, very difficult actually.
Massively important. When these events happen, I recently lost my daughter. When these events come along, it knocks you for six. It's just completely overwhelming. There's no manual for this. There's no guidebook to follow. You just feel completely at a loss. You're not kind of sure what it is you want to say, but you're bursting to say something. I think it's extremely important. Yeah.
You don't really know who's going to be the best person to talk to, I think, until you go through something like somebody dying. For me personally, my father recently died. And the person I thought that would be most useful to talk to wasn't. And yet, the opposite happened. The people I felt wouldn't be most useful were.
Well, for me personally, dying affected me individually. My daughter passing affected me individually, affected my family, affected all my loved ones, affects my work. So I think there's various conversations that can be helpful. That perhaps set out to do different things. As a father that's lost a child, I think the impact for me mostly was that I felt I'd let her down. I felt that the time she most needed me, I wasn't there. And it's important, I found it important to know that people recognise that people appreciate, that people acknowledge that it's a very personal pain that you're going through. It's one of those kind of things of life, what's the saying? There's nothing sure in life apart from death and taxes. So it'll affect us all, but how it affects us is so unique and so individual. So I think I think the various people that can be helpful. Certainly I've talked to my family, my surviving daughter mostly, in many ways, and my partner. But I've talked to my doctor, I've talked to my priest. There's various conversations that I found really helpful at different levels. I think the issue that I found is that death and bereavement, it's like a cake that's got 65 million layers, and you won't find the answer in every conversation. But if you're able to talk to enough people in a way that you feel safe and able to do, you will find help, you will find support around the different levels from different people. So it's not just a case of kind of who to talk to. My advice would be to talk to as many people as possible in a way that you feel safe to do so. Yeah.
It is a tricky subject, and if you go too much into it, then all the feelings that are associated with it and remembering. And I suppose, yes, so it is still difficult. It is still difficult for me to talk about death. It's not easy at all, no.
I thought it'd be something quite easy to talk about until I started doing it. It's really difficult because you feel like you've gotten over certain things, you feel like you've gotten everything dealt with and under control, and actually death lingers with you for a long time. Like I said, my father died on New Year's Eve, and that's 5 months ago, and it's still there.
Just taking that a step further, I had even thought about having some bereavement counselling, because I think there's a lot of issues that I never resolved. And so I think through talking it through with somebody, I think it would help me resolve those issues, and also maybe able to then help other people as well, I suppose, if that makes sense. But I think it is something we don't talk enough about. It is such a taboo subject. I think it's good when there's a group of you together and you can talk about it, then it's safer. And when you're with friends and things. I think when you're with family, it's more difficult to talk about.
When my daughter passed away, had a funeral on Halloween last year, my house is full of about 60 people. you know, and so the support was there. Lots of chances to speak, lots of, kind of areas open to me. But I wasn't ready to talk about that, talk about things, at that time. And yet I was constantly reminded, because people would say, how are you? How are you? It's an interesting question. I came on the train this morning, chap says to me, how are you? Well, that's quite a question. I can say, fine, I'm going to work. Inside, I'm crumbling, So I think it's hard to talk about, because people are not sure how you're going to react and how they're going to react. Because what I also noticed in my experience is that, having been open and talked about my loss, it's amazing how many people have that experience but don't talk about it. All of a sudden, it's possible. It's like almost I give them permission because I'm opening up, if you like, to my experience. Sorry, a bit of a ramble there, but I think people are unsure how it's going to affect you, how it's going to affect them, and that I think it comes from compassion. I think people, really want to talk about it at a certain level, and they want to talk about their experiences, but compassion for each other it's a very easy word to say, but it's actually very powerful to be involved with it, because if you really are compassionate for somebody, then it's overwhelming. So people don't know how to talk about it necessarily because they're scared of hurting you, or scared of their own experiences. If you talk about your dying, then that brings that other person their experience of dying or their perceived events to come. People have said to me, for example, since I've spoken about losing my daughter Becky, that they've noticed that they're in contact every day with the fact that their child might go, and it's enriched their life, and they've been really humble and kind, and thanking me for that. If you talk about your experience, it reminds people of their experiences.